Hi, my name's Christine. I'm a software engineer at Parse, and today we'll talk about Parse analytics. Thanks for bearing with me. I hope today's been a great day, and this will be the last of the sessions. So with Parse analytics, I'm going to cover how to get data on how you're currently using Parse, how to do a little bit of work and get a lot of information around Parse data, around the flow of information through Parse, and finally, all the ways you can play with your information and answer just the questions you want to ask. Graphs, we love them. At a glance, you can see how your apps are doing, what the breakdown is of your users, of your data, how quickly your user base is growing, how quickly sales are spiking, and as a result, how close we are to early retirement. So there are a lot of companies that do this. There are a lot of companies focused entirely around collecting your data and spitting out graphs and letting you put funnels in between, and companies that produce products that let you host the solution yourself, so it's all on your own servers. And so with all of these options out there, why did we feel like there needed to be a session about analytics here at Parse Developer Day? Why did we feel like it was something that needed to be folded in? Well, if you caught some of the talks earlier today, you'll know, you already know a little bit about Parse data, Parse social, Parse push. And so if your app is already doing something like this, if you're already saving data to Parse, you're fetching it, doing queries, any sort of thing like that, then you know, or then you can get data like this, because our servers already know how you've been accessing your data. And the best part about being able to access how much I've been talking to Parse, what sorts of clients I've been talking to Parse, which collections I'm touching, what sort of operations I'm doing, you get it for free. This means you don't have to do any extra work. There's no client code, no new releases. You don't have to use up any extra API requests, which charges you no extra money. And so it's free in all senses of the word. Let's take a look at how this looks. So here we've got a very simple app. If any of you are familiar with that shell game, the one with 3 shells and a P and usually some guy trying to take your money, this is a very simple iOS version of it. These are 3 shells. One of them has a P underneath, and we get to guess which one has a P. Oh, we got it the first time. We can reset, play again, so on and so forth. So this is a really simple app. There's no server code, no nothing. It's just client code and a little bit of randomness thrown in. So now with all that you've learned today at Parse Developer Day, with Parse in our toolbox, let's see what we can add. This is the code for the view controller. And these are really the 2 methods that you need to think about, or you need to look at. We have reset, which is triggered when you tap the reset button, and select shell, which is triggered anytime any of these 3 buttons are tapped. So let's say as an app developer, or as this app developer, I want to know how many games are played and whether the user wins or not, just so we can keep track or have a scoreboard later or something. Well, we've already set up a game property up here. And so in the reset method, as we initialize the state for each game, let's set up a game object. To make our lives a little bit easier, we'll initialize it with an initial set of parameters where, by default, the user has not won the game yet. And we'll say p-index here. We'll pass this in so we can maybe run some queries on it later. So now that we have this PF object set up, when the user makes their selection, we want to know if they win or not, and then we want to save it. So you can see we iterate over the shells, and if the shell that we've tapped is the one with the P, let's mark our game as having been won. So before I run this and show you things that move, this is the API request graph for this app so far. Clearly, nothing has happened. We have just added our code, haven't even run it yet. So totally blank slate. Once we run it, though, we start saving data. If this was a different talk, I'd be showing you the data browser. But instead, we're going to refresh and take a look at what happens in real time. So you can see we just played 4 games. And the exciting part about this graph and this UI is that we can now segment it by all of these things by default. So you can say, oh, I only care about iOS clients, which right now we only have an iOS client. You can say, oh, let's only look at requests that touch the game class. And you can save them for later. So you can save them, come back, play around. Someone can build a breakdown, and you can tell your coworker to come back and look at the same breakdown. There's also request type. So you can, if you've got something that has a lot of updating, saving, creation, you can split it down by those as well. Great. Now let's go back to the presentation, please. Can we go back to, awesome. So some of you aren't using parse data, or some of you are, but you're also using parse push. And Tom and Hector earlier today have shown you how easy it is to set up your device to receive pushes, and how easy it can be to push from the web console or from the REST API, what have you. But what happens after it leaves our servers? What happens after you've sent your 40,000 pushes out to devices? Are users actually interacting with your app? Are they opening it? Are they sending messages? Are they responding to that conversation that you told them about? What's going on? Let's take a look at what sorts of things we can provide. All right, so we've got this great game, and it's out, and it's in the App Store, and people are playing it. And let's say we want to have some sort of admin panel to keep track of what's going on and how often people are opening the app, how many games they play, whatever. Well, let's take a look at what the admin panel can give us first before we do any work. You can see push notifications, of which we have none, app opens, which are generic, just each time the app is opened, whether from a push notification or just having the icon. And finally, push opens, which are app opens that are specifically triggered by a push notification. And the implementation for this is slightly different on each platform, so take a look at the particular guide when implementing this. In this example, we're actually going to do this in an Android app. Here's the very basic push setup code. Tom may have covered this in his push talk. So we'll skip over and say, all right, this is the main activity. At the end of the onCreate, we want to track that, we want to tell Parse, hey, this app was opened. Here's some metadata around why and how it was opened. And on Android, it's as simple as track app opened. For those of you who may not be Android developers, get intent is essentially just a bundle of information around why this activity was launched. And the analog on iOS would, for example, be launch options. So now that we have this entered into our, or written up, we can launch our app. And if you remember this blank graph from before, we can refresh it. And ta-da! All right, we've got a data point. Cool. What about push notifications? What then? Go through the push console. You can see we've got this one installation set up to receive a push. And we'll say, I'll make sure this is, there we go. So here's our push notification. And if we tap on this and trigger the app open, let's see, then you can see all the data update to reflect that. Push notifications is one underneath the green line. You can see the bottom counts at the bottom. It's very cool. One thing to note is that for enterprise customers, we actually provide even further details into what happens behind each push. And this is an example. You can kind of see It's at a higher granularity over a shorter period of time, so you can actually see the graph of how people are interacting with your push, whether they're opening it after 5 minutes, an hour, 18 hours. We also have open rates and average open rates over the last 20 or so large pushes that you've made. Great. If we can go back to the presentation. So parse data and parse push are awesome. But sometimes you want to track things that don't result in a server call, or some things that don't result in data persistence. Sometimes you just want to know if someone used that edit photo flow before uploading that photo. Sometimes you want to know if users even get close to hitting sign up or filling out the sign up form before creating their account, or whether they cancel out. And maybe you just want to track if Facebook login fails without having to bring in a whole crash reporting, error reporting framework. So today we announced custom analytics, which are just free-form events as simple as they get with a bag of dimensions. It's an API call with an event name, dimensions, and you can use the same UI we just played with to mess around, slice and dice, do whatever you want, but this time with dimensions that you define, rather than the ones we provide. Also, one cool thing is you can take the data that you're getting for free from Parse, all the analytics around creation, updating of objects, et cetera, and see how they affect these custom events. So everything works well together. And I will show you that now. Great. So we've got this game. And say you're watching someone play it, you're looking over their shoulder, and they keep hitting reset. And you know this doesn't do anything. You understand probability. You know that hitting reset a bunch of times doesn't actually affect their chances, but they're doing it anyway. And so you're curious and say, I wonder how many people are doing this. I wonder if I can keep track of how often this happens. Well, in the reset action, we know that if we've initialized that self.game property, but it doesn't have an object ID yet, then we know it hasn't been saved. Object ID is the ID assigned to the object by Parse on save. So we can do something like, if it exists, but there's no object ID, we'll call it a hasty reset. And if you want, you can pass dimensions in. In this case, we won't. It's a pretty simple event. But when we run it, you can start to see the custom events show up on the right-hand side, again, with whatever parameters or dimensions you provide. In this case, you'll notice that we didn't provide any parameters, but we track platform for you. So once you start diversifying and having more clients running this great game you've built, you can see which ones are doing more work. The Parse Developer Day apps that you guys are all using, we've been kind of seeing which ones have been getting more use, and it's kind of interesting to be able to compare and split Android versus iOS. And again, it's great to be able to save these, come back, compare, have them all overlaid on top of each other whenever you want. Can we go back to the presentation, please? Can we go back to the presentation, please? Thank you. So that's Parse Analytics, a very high-level view, because I hope that you all go home and play with it. You've got API analytics, which are no work, no cost, no extra API requests. Push analytics, which give you a lot more insight into a service you may or may not already be using. And custom analytics, where you can do whatever you want, track whatever information you want, and play with it however you want. And before you ask, export for analytics is coming soon. It's just not in this release. So if you have any questions, I'm happy to take them. Otherwise, I don't want to hold you back from the beer, so I'll be around if you would prefer asking questions in private. Right here. Delayed data? Delayed data, yeah. So if you're familiar with our save eventually behavior, we essentially use that in the background. So when you store some information, or sorry, when you track an event, we store the timestamp that it's called. If you don't have a network connection at that point, we save that timestamp, we serialize that request, and send it again when we do. So it will eventually get to our servers with a timestamp that it was called, but perhaps not immediately.
Do you expire it like that, or like, so say, August 1st, I publish some custom events, I'm not online, the developer goes and looks and sees, oh, nothing happened August 1st, the guy's not online for like a week, then, will you augment something that's that late, or?
We don't expire save eventually data. If the device is offline for a week and comes back online, we will try to send it. It is also, one thing to note is it is dependent on the timestamp of the client. And so if a user just has a phone that says it's 2007, we're just gonna get that information, but yeah.
Hi, I was just curious if you're going to create like a data API for the analytics information?
Export will initially be just exporting CSVs. Data API will probably be in the works. We have a lot of things we want to do with analytics, and so this is just getting custom analytics out the door so you guys can start playing with it and expanding and iterating as we go. I think being on Facebook infrastructure, being at Facebook now will also open up what we can do.
How are the bag of key value pairs used? Can you create like custom filters on these to correlate the activities? I didn't see that in the UI, so it'd be.
Yeah, sorry. If you, so the example I was playing around with API analytics, where you could say like, oh, get game or get this class, that's essentially the interface that you'd use for custom analytics. So say if you're tracking an event like signups, where you track like the source, like they sign up from web and they're this gender and they did it on a Tuesday, you'd have that same interface. You can either toggle it on, select from one of those options, toggle it off, however you want. And I believe that same interface, export will be from that same interface as well. You'll set up your graphs, and then if you want that dumped in a CSV, you'll hit a button and you'll get the data back.
Christine, how long are these analytics stored? Because you showed it real time and.
In perpetuity.
Really?
We have no plans to expire your information. We may have, I think we may ultimately have a limit on how the size of the time window to export. We don't want you to be able to, 4 years in the future, export 4 years of data and crash everything. But we're not planning any sort of restrictions on, not being able to export data from a year ago.
Is it possible for consumers to opt out of tracking? Let's say for privacy reasons, some of my customers may not want to be tracked.
I think that will be up to the app. That will probably be up to the app developers, especially for custom and push analytics, because those sorts of things are configurable by the developer. If you want to make it opt out for your users, you're absolutely able to. For API analytics, because that usage is going through our servers anyway, that would be, it doesn't make as much sense to try to make that opt out, if that makes sense. Any other questions?
As far as analytics go, are there any plans to provide some sort of A/B or multivariate testing framework in order to leverage these analytics to iterate a better product faster?
James, the guy who talked about web stuff, would love that. He's definitely been talking about that. We have a lot of interesting things we want to do around A/B testing, push, all sorts of analytics.
Is it possible to pull the analytics back out into the app? So in your example of the game, I could say, you could show the user you've won 33% of the time, you've beat the 20% average of everybody who's played?
You could probably set something up where maybe you have something, right now, I think if you had to do it, you could maybe do something where you use cloud code to hit that export endpoint when export is up in order to load that. Sorry, someone asked about the data API earlier, and I realized that I didn't quite answer that. I don't think we'd be opposed to it. That is not currently something that we're prioritizing. But we could, certainly. And ideally, we'd have some way for you to gently get that information. Any other questions? All right, I'll be around. Come find me. Otherwise, thank you. Hope you had a great day. Enjoy the party.